Infinite Spiritual Human Being, by David Russo. Introduction. The quiet beginning. Before anything else, pause. Not for long, just a moment. Let the rush of your day soften, even slightly. Let the need to figure everything out rest in the background. Now notice something simple. You are here, not your name, not your past, not the roles you play in other people's lives. Just the undeniable sense that you exist in this moment. There is an awareness reading these words right now. It is quiet, but it is there. It has always been there. Most of your life, you've been taught to understand yourself through what can be seen and measured. Your appearance, your achievements, your personality, your story. Over time, these things began to feel like the complete picture of who you are. But they are not the complete picture. They are only the surface. Beneath all of that, beneath the thoughts, the emotions, the labels, and the expectations, there is something deeper, something steady, something that does not come and go with circumstances. You may not have language for it yet, but you have felt it in moments of stillness, in times when everything briefly made sense without explanation, in the quiet spaces where you weren't trying to be anything at all. This audiobook is not here to give you a new identity. It is here to gently loosen the ones you've been holding onto. Because what you are is not something you need to build. It is something you begin to notice when the noise settles. And once you begin to notice it, even in small ways, something shifts. Not dramatically at first, but enough to question, enough to wonder, enough to begin. This is where the journey starts. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Truth. There was never a moment when you stopped being what you are. There was only a moment when you stopped noticing, and even that didn't happen all at once. It happened gradually, so gradually that you didn't question it. As a child, there was a natural sense of openness in you. You didn't need a reason to feel alive. You didn't wake up wondering if you were enough. You didn't measure your worth against a list of expectations. You experienced life directly. A sound was just a sound. A feeling was just a feeling. A moment was simply a moment. There was no constant voice explaining everything, judging everything, comparing everything. Then, little by little, things began to change. You were taught how to behave, what to believe, what success looked like, what failure meant. You learned how to describe yourself, how to present yourself, how to fit into the world around you. None of this was wrong. It was necessary. In many ways, it helped you navigate life. It gave you structure, language, and direction, but along with it came something subtle. You began to confuse what you learned with what you are. You started to build an identity out of experiences, labels, and expectations, and over time, that identity began to feel solid, like something fixed, something real, something that defined you completely. But it doesn't, because everything that makes up that identity can change. Your roles can change, your beliefs can change, your circumstances can change, even your personality can shift over time. And yet, something in you has remained constant through all of it. Something that was there when you were a child. Something that is here now. Something that has quietly witnessed every moment of your life, without needing to announce itself. This is the part of you that was never lost, only overlooked. The forgotten truth is not something distant or hidden behind complexity. It is simple. So simple that the mind often dismisses it. You are not only the person you have learned to be, you are the awareness that has been present through every version of that person. Right now, as you read this, that awareness is here. It is not something you need to create. It is not something you need to achieve. It is already present, quietly observing, and the moment you begin to notice it even faintly, you begin to remember, not intellectually, but directly, like recognizing something familiar that you couldn't quite name before. This remembering doesn't require effort in the way you might expect. It doesn't come from trying harder or thinking more. In fact, it often appears when you stop trying so much, when you pause, when you become still, even briefly, when you allow yourself to step back from the constant stream of thoughts and simply observe. In that space, something becomes clear. You are here, before the thought. You are here, during the thought, and you are still here. After the thought passes, that presence in changing, steady, aware is the beginning of understanding who you truly are, not as an idea, but as a direct experience. And once you begin to see it, even in small moments, something shifts. You may still play your roles. You may still carry your responsibilities. Life will continue to move as it always has. But underneath it all, there will be a quiet knowing, a sense that you are more than the surface, more than the story, more than what you were told. The truth was never taken from you. It was only covered. And now, gently, patiently, you are beginning to uncover it again. Chapter 2. The Identity Illusion. If someone asked you who you are, how would you answer? Most people don't hesitate. The response comes quickly, almost automatically. A name, a profession, a role, a personality trait, a personal history. I'm a parent. I'm a business owner. I'm someone who struggles with confidence. I'm successful. I'm still figuring things out. These answers feel true, and in a practical sense, they are, but they are not the full truth. They are descriptions, snapshots of experiences, roles, and patterns that exist within your life. They help you navigate the world, communicate with others, and create a sense of continuity. But something important often goes unnoticed. Everything you use to define yourself can change. Your job can change. Your relationships can change. Your beliefs can evolve. Even the way you see yourself can shift dramatically over time. If these things are always changing, then how can they be the core of who you are? The mind resists this question because identity creates a sense of stability. It gives you something to hold on to. Without it, things can feel uncertain, even uncomfortable. So the mind builds a story. It takes pieces of your past, your preferences, your successes and failures, and weaves them into a narrative. This is me. And over time, you begin to believe that narrative is solid, fixed, real. But if you look closely, you'll begin to see something different. That story is constantly being updated, rewritten, reinterpreted. What you believed about yourself 5 years ago may not feel true today. What feels certain now may shift in the future. And yet, throughout all those changes, there has been something constant, something that has been present through every version of you. That presence is not the story. It is the awareness of the story. Right now, you can notice a thought about yourself. Maybe it's positive. Maybe it's critical. Maybe it's something you've repeated many times. But the moment you notice it, something becomes clear. You are aware of that thought, which means the thought is not you. It is something appearing within your awareness. The same is true for every label you carry. I am this. I am that. These are ideas. Useful. Sometimes even necessary, but still ideas. And ideas are not permanent. When you begin to see identity in this way, it doesn't disappear. You still function in the world. You still use your name, fulfill your roles, and make decisions. But your relationship to identity begins to change. It becomes lighter, more flexible, less confining. You no longer have to defend it so fiercely or fear its change so deeply, because, at some level, you begin to understand. You are not limited to any single version of yourself. You are not contained within a label. You are not defined by a fixed story. You are the awareness in which all of these identities appear and disappear. And that awareness is not restricted. It doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't need to become anything. It simply is. The illusion was never that identity exists. The illusion is believing that it is all that you are. And as that illusion begins to loosen, something else becomes possible. A way of living that is not driven by the need to constantly protect, prove, or define yourself, but instead, a way of living that flows more naturally, grounded not in who you think you must be, but in what you already are. Chapter 3. The voice in your head isn't you. There is a voice in your head that rarely goes silent. It speaks in the background of your life, narrating, interpreting, reacting. Sometimes it plans the future. Sometimes it replays the past. Sometimes it judges what's happening right now. It might sound like you, but it is not you. For most of your life, you may not have questioned this voice. It feels familiar. It has been there for as long as you can remember. So naturally, you assume it is your identity, the center of who you are. But look more closely, right now. As you read these words, thoughts may already be forming. Comments like, "This makes sense," or "I'm not sure about this," or even, "What does this really mean for me?" Notice something important. You can hear those thoughts. You can observe them as they appear. And if you can observe something, it means it is not the observer. The voice in your head is not constant in content. It changes tone, direction, and intensity. Some days it is supportive. Other days it is critical. Sometimes it is loud and overwhelming. Other times, barely noticeable. But no matter what it says, there is something that remains unchanged. The awareness that hears it. That awareness does not argue. It does not judge. It does not rush to conclusions. It simply notices. This is a subtle but powerful shift in understanding, because when you believe you are the voice, you become entangled in everything it says. Every worrying feels real. Every criticism feels personal. Every fear feels urgent. You are pulled into an ongoing stream of mental activity with no space in between. But the moment you recognize that the voice is something you can observe, space appears, a small gap at first, just enough to notice. There is a thought, not, "This is me." In that gap, something changes. You are no longer completely identified with every thought that passes through your mind. You begin to see them as events temporary, shifting, and often repetitive. You may even start to notice patterns, the same worries appearing again and again, the same judgment replaying in different situations, the same stories reinforcing a familiar sense of self. And as you see these patterns, their grip begins to loosen, not because you are forcing them to stop, but because you are no longer unconsciously becoming them. This does not mean the voice disappears. It will still speak. It will still comment, analyze, and react. That is part of how the mind functions. But your relationship with it changes. You begin to listen without being controlled. You begin to notice without being consumed. You begin to realize that thoughts are tools, not truths, that must always be believed. And in that realization, there is freedom, a quiet, steady freedom that does not depend on the voice going silent. Because even when the voice is active, you now know something deeper. You are not the noise. You are the awareness in which the noise appears. And that awareness is already calm, already present, already whole. Chapter 4. Awareness behind the mind. Take a moment and notice your thoughts. You don't have to change them. You don't have to stop them. Just notice. A thought appears, and then it fades. Another one follows, and then it passes. They come and go on their own, like clouds moving across the sky. Now shift your attention slightly. Instead of focusing on the thoughts themselves, notice that you are aware of them. There is something in you that sees them arrive and sees them leave. That seeing is not a thought. It is not a judgment. It is simply awareness. Now notice your emotions. At times they feel strong, overwhelming. Even, at other times, they are subtle, almost invisible. But no matter how intense or quiet they are, they also change. They rise, they peak, and eventually, they dissolve. And again, something in you is aware of that entire process. Now notice your body. It moves, it feels, it changes over time. It grows, ages, heals, and responds to the world around it. And just like thoughts and emotions, your body is something you are aware of. So here is a simple but profound question. If you are aware of your thoughts, and aware of your emotions, and aware of your body, then what is this awareness itself? It cannot be a thought, because thoughts are observed. It cannot be an emotion, because emotions are felt and then pass. It cannot even be the body, because the body is something you can perceive. Awareness is different. It does not come and go in the same way. It is present before a thought appears. It is present while the thought exists, and it remains after the thought disappears. The same is true for emotions and sensations. Awareness is the constant background of every experience you've ever had. You may not have noticed it clearly before, because attention is usually focused on what is happening, what you're thinking, feeling, or doing. But the moment you begin to turn attention toward awareness itself, something shifts. There is a sense of stillness, not because everything around you becomes still, but because you are no longer completely caught in the movement. Awareness does not rush. It does not resist. It does not try to hold onto or push away experience. It allows everything to be as it is. This doesn't mean you stop functioning in the world. You still think, act, decide, and respond. But underneath all of that, there is a quiet stability, a sense that, no matter what is happening on the surface, something deeper remains unchanged. This is the beginning of a different way of relating to life. Instead of being fully identified with every passing experience, you begin to rest in the space in which those experiences occur. And from that space, things become clearer, not because you have all the answers, but because you are no longer lost in the constant movement of the mind. You are connected to something more fundamental, something that has always been here, something that does not need to be created, improved, or fixed, only recognized. Awareness behind the mind is not distant or abstract. It is what is here, right now, quietly noticing these words, and the more you become familiar with it, the more natural it feels. Not like discovering something new, but like returning to something that was never truly gone. Chapter 5. The Infinite Within. If you try to find the edges of your awareness, where would you look? Close your eyes for a moment and notice what is here. Sounds may arise distant or near. Sensations in your body may come into focus. Thoughts may appear, one after another. All of this is happening within your experience. But where exactly does your awareness end? You can notice what appears in awareness. But can you find a boundary to awareness itself? There is no clear line, no edge you can point to and say, it stops here. This is why the idea of being infinite is not as abstract as it first seems. It does not mean that your body stretches endlessly through space. It means that the awareness you are the space in which your entire experience unfolds does not present itself as something confined or limited in the way physical objects are. Everything you experience appears within it. Thoughts come and go within it. Emotions rise and fall within it. The world, as you perceive it, is known within it. And yet, awareness itself remains unchanged. It is not made larger by pleasant experiences. It is not made smaller by difficult ones. It simply allows. This can be difficult for the mind to fully grasp, because the mind is used to working with definitions, boundaries, and categories. It wants to label awareness as something specific, something it can understand and control. But awareness is not an object. It is not something you can hold onto or examine from the outside. It is what you are, and because of that, it cannot be reduced to a concept. The moment you try to define it completely, it slips beyond the definition. Still, you can recognize it, not through analysis, but through direct noticing. Right now, without effort, you are aware. There is nothing you needed to do to create that awareness. It is already present, and in that presence, there is a quiet sense of openness. Nothing is being forced. Nothing is being held together. Experience is simply unfolding. When you begin to rest in this understanding even briefly, you may notice a shift. The need to control every outcome begins to soften. The pressure to define yourself in rigid ways begins to ease. There is more space for life to move. This does not mean you stop caring or become passive. It means your actions begin to come from a deeper place, not from fear or limitation, but from clarity and connection. The infinite within you is not something distant or unreachable. It is not something reserved for special moments or certain people. It is what is here before, during, and after every experience. Always present, always open, always available. You may not always be aware of it, but it is always aware as you. And as you begin to recognize this more often, something changes in how you relate to yourself and the world. You are no longer just a small, separate part moving through life. You begin to sense that life itself is unfolding within a much greater field of awareness, a field that is not outside of you, but not limited to the idea of you either. This is the beginning of understanding what it means to be infinite, not as a belief, but as a direct, lived experience, quiet, spacious, unbounded. Chapter 6. Breaking the limits you inherited. Much of what you believe about yourself did not begin with you. It was learned, passed down through words, behaviors, expectations, and unspoken assumptions. From a young age, you absorbed ideas about what is possible, what is acceptable, and what defines success or failure. You learned how to see yourself by first learning how others saw you. Maybe you were told you were capable. Maybe you were told you needed to try harder. Maybe you were praised for certain traits and discouraged from expressing others. Over time, these messages became internal. They formed beliefs, and those beliefs began to shape the way you think, the way you act, and the way you interpret your experiences. The most powerful part is this. After a while, you stop recognizing them as learned. They begin to feel like truth. I'm not good enough. I always struggle with this. This is just who I am. These statements can feel solid, unquestionable. But if you pause and look closely, you may begin to see something different. Where did these ideas come from? Were you born believing them, or did you adopt them, slowly, through repetition and experience? This is not about blaming anyone, not your family, not your environment, not your past. Everyone operates from what they themselves have learned, but recognizing that your beliefs were shaped over time opens a door, because anything that was learned can be questioned, and anything that can be questioned can begin to loosen. This does not mean you need to reject everything you've been taught. Some beliefs are helpful, some provide structure and meaning, but others quietly limit you. They create invisible boundaries, lines you don't cross, not because you truly can't, but because you've come to believe you can't. These limits often go unnoticed. They show up as hesitation, as self-doubt, as the feeling that something is not for you. And yet, when you bring awareness to them, something shifts. You begin to see the belief as a belief, not as an absolute fact. This creates space. Space to ask, is this true? Is this always true? Who would I be without this belief? These are not questions meant to force an answer. They are invitations to look more deeply, to step outside of automatic thinking, to reconnect with the awareness that exists before the belief takes hold. Because beneath every inherited idea about who you are, there is something untouched, something that has not been shaped by expectation or limitation. That deeper presence does not carry the same boundaries. It does not say, "This is all I can be." It simply is open, aware, and not confined by the past. As you begin to recognize this, your relationship with limitation changes. You don't have to fight your beliefs. You don't have to force yourself to become someone else. Instead, you begin to see clearly. And in that clarity, many limits lose their power naturally. You may still hear the old thoughts. You may still feel the familiar doubts. But now, there is a difference. You are not completely defined by them. You can see them and choose whether to follow them. This is where freedom begins, not in changing everything at once, but in gently stepping beyond what you once believed was fixed, and discovering, moment by moment, that you are not as limited as you were taught to be. Chapter 7. Fear, Ego, and Separation. Fear often feels immediate and real. It can appear suddenly in your thoughts, in your body, in your reactions to the world around you. Sometimes it's obvious, like anxiety before a difficult situation. Other times, it's subtle, quietly shaping your decisions without you even realizing it. At its core, fear is not the problem. It is a natural response, designed to protect. But what it protects is worth understanding. Much of the fear you experience is connected to a sense of identity, the idea of who you believe yourself to be. This constructed sense of self is often called the ego. The ego is not an enemy. It is simply a structure the mind creates to navigate the world. It organizes your experiences into a story. It helps you function, relate, and make sense of things. But it also has a limitation. It sees itself as separate from others, separate from life, separate from anything that feels uncertain or unknown. And from that sense of separation, fear naturally arises, because if you are only this separate identity, this body, this story, this role, then the world can feel unpredictable, even threatening. There is always something to protect, something to defend, something to hold on to. The ego responds by trying to create control. It compares you to others. It seeks approval. It avoids discomfort. It builds walls where it feels vulnerable. Again, this is not wrong. It is simply incomplete, because beneath this constructed identity, there is something deeper that is not defined by separation in the same way. When you begin to recognize yourself as awareness, not just the story, not just the role, your relationship with fear starts to change. Fear may still arise. Your body may still react. Thoughts may still appear, warning you of what could go wrong. But something new becomes possible. You can observe fear without immediately becoming it. You can feel it without letting it fully define your actions. There is space. In that space, you begin to notice that fear is not permanent. It moves. It shifts, it rises and falls, just like thoughts and emotions. And most importantly, It is experienced within awareness. It is not the entirety of who you are. The same is true for the ego. You still have a personality. You still have preferences, goals, and responsibilities. The ego continues to function as part of your human experience, but it is no longer the center of everything. It becomes something you can work with, rather than something you are completely identified with. This softens the sense of separation. You begin to feel less like an isolated self trying to navigate a threatening world, and more like a part of something larger, connected, present, and supported in ways that are not always visible to the mind. From this perspective, fear loses some of its intensity, not because life becomes predictable or perfectly safe, but because you are no longer facing it from a place of complete identification with a limited self. There is a deeper steadiness underneath, a quiet sense that, even when fear arises, there is something in you that remains unchanged, something that does not need to defend itself, something that is not defined by separation. And as you become more familiar with that deeper presence, fear begins to transform. It no longer controls you in the same way. It becomes something you can move through, rather than something you must avoid. And in that shift, a new kind of freedom begins to emerge. Not the absence of fear, but the ability to live fully, even when fear is present. Chapter 8. Returning to presence. The present moment is the only place life truly exists. Everything else, the past you remember, the future you anticipate, exists only as thought, memories and projections. Stories your mind tells to make sense of time. They are real in a sense, but they are not the living, breathing experience of now. Notice how often your mind drifts. A conversation, a task, a worrying, or a plan pulls you away from this moment. Even as you read these words, your mind may be elsewhere, remembering something from yesterday, anticipating what comes next. Presence is different. It is not something you create. You do not need to invent it, chase it, or manufacture it. Presence is already here. It is what is noticing the mind's wandering. It is the space in which thoughts, emotions, and sensations appear. It is the steady background of your experience. To return to presence, all that is required is noticing, pausing, breathing, allowing yourself to step out of the constant stream of thought for a single instant. When you do this, even briefly, you may notice a subtle shift. Life slows not because the world changes, but because you are no longer caught entirely in it. There is a quiet openness, a space between the observer and the observed. In that space, something becomes clear. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not even the body experiencing them. You are the awareness in which all these experiences arise. Presence does not demand perfection. It does not require that your mind become empty or that your life become quiet. Presence is simply noticing, right where you are, right now. It can appear in a noisy room, in the middle of a task, or even during a difficult conversation. The more you practice returning to presence, the more natural it becomes. It becomes a subtle undercurrent in your life, a quiet awareness that is always available, even as thoughts continue to arise and pass. From this space, life begins to feel less reactive. You may notice that your actions are calmer, more deliberate. Your perception of events becomes clearer, less clouded by judgment or fear. Presence is not a destination. It is not a state you achieve and then hold forever. It is the simple act of noticing what is here, moment by moment. And in that noticing, a profound truth begins to emerge. The life you have been searching for outside yourself has always been inside. Here, now, in this moment. It is accessible the instant you return to it. Chapter 9. Living awake in a busy world. Awareness is not meant to exist only in quiet moments. It is not meant to be a retreat from life. True presence flows into every aspect of your day, even in the midst of noise, activity, and responsibility. The world will always demand your attention. Conversations will pull you in different directions. Tasks will pile up. Challenges will arise. Life will continue in its usual rhythm, whether you are awake to it or not. Living awake does not mean withdrawing from this activity. It means being present while engaged. It means noticing the flow of life as it unfolds and responding consciously rather than reacting automatically. Even in the busiest moments, you can bring awareness to what you are doing. When walking, notice each step. When speaking, Notice each word. When listening, truly hear not just to respond, but to connect. Small pauses, small moments of noticing, begin to expand into a continuous thread of presence throughout your day. Being awake also means recognizing the patterns of your mind while you act. Thoughts may rush in, worries may surface, old habits may tempt you. Instead of being carried away, you notice them. You see them as events passing through awareness, not as commands you must follow. This subtle shift changes everything. Life does not slow down, but your perception does. You are no longer entirely lost in distraction, worrying, or automatic patterns. You move through life with more clarity, more freedom, and more ease. Living awake is not about achieving perfection or maintaining constant calm. It is about being conscious, observing, choosing, and participating in life rather than being swept along by it. In this way, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. A conversation becomes a practice of listening. A task becomes a practice of attention. A challenge becomes a practice of presence. Even amidst busyness, you are not lost. You are not just living as a reaction to circumstance. You are living from awareness. And in that, a quiet power begins to emerge, an unshakable center that remains steady, no matter what life brings. Awake living is not something you turn on and off. It is a way of being that unfolds gradually, moment by moment, wherever you are. And the more you practice, the more natural it feels. Life stops feeling like something you have to survive and begins to feel like something you participate in fully. Presence in action. Awake, aware, alive becomes your new normal. Chapter 10. Becoming what you already are. There is a subtle paradox at the heart of this journey. You are not becoming something new. You are not adding another layer, or chasing a version of yourself that does not exist. You are uncovering, remembering, and resting in what has always been true. Throughout this audiobook, you have explored identity, awareness, presence, and the infinite nature of your being. Each insight, each quiet recognition, is not a step towards something external. It is a turning inward, a gentle uncovering of what is already here. You may notice that life continues to present challenges. You may feel uncertainty, struggle, or discomfort. And yet, underneath all of it, something remains unchanged. That something is you, the awareness that observes, the space in which all experience unfolds, the infinite presence that has never left. Becoming what you already are is not a goal. It is not a practice of forcing transformation. It is a process of allowing yourself to remember, moment by moment, that your true nature has never been lost. When you act from this understanding, life begins to shift naturally. Decisions become clearer. Actions become more aligned. Relationships deepen, not because you try harder, but because you respond from a place of authenticity rather than fear or habit. You begin to live with a sense of ease that does not depend on external circumstances. Challenges arise, but they are no longer overwhelming. Thoughts appear, but they do not control you. Emotions move, but you are not consumed by them. Presence is your foundation, steady and uncheckable. The process is gradual. It is not about perfection or arriving at a final destination. It is about returning, again and again, to the awareness that has always been here. Each moment of recognition is a small act of remembering, a quiet acknowledgement of your infinite self. And as you continue to remember, life itself transforms. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. The mundane becomes sacred. Every breath, every sensation, every thought becomes an opportunity to witness and participate in the infinite within you. Becoming what you already are, the simplest and most profound shift possible. Recognizing that you are not limited, not separate, not bound by fear or identity. You are infinite, fully present, and whole always. This is not a future you wait for. It is not a goal you must reach. It is the truth you step into now. In this very moment, as you read these words, and in that realization, everything changes. Conclusion: the infinite in the everyday, the journey we've explored together, is not about escaping life or seeking something better somewhere else. It is about returning to what is already here, quietly, beneath the surface of thought, beyond the limits of identity, and untouched by fear. You do not need to travel to distant lands, perform extraordinary feats, or achieve perfection to find this truth. It is not hidden in accomplishments, possessions, or approval from others. It is accessible in this very moment in the awareness that notices, observes, and simply is. Life will continue to unfold with all its challenges, unpredictability, and impermanence. Difficulties will arise, emotions will flow, and the mind will continue to wander. And yet, beneath it all, there is a steady, unchanging presence, your infinite self. A presence that does not judge, does not fear, and does not need to prove anything. The essence of being an infinite spiritual human being is simple, yet profound, recognizing that you are not the surface of experience, but the space in which it all occurs. You are not your thoughts, your fears, your roles, or your past. You are the awareness behind them, the quiet, infinite presence that has always been, and always will be. As you move forward, bring this recognition into your everyday life. Notice it in small moments while walking, breathing, listening, working, or resting. Let awareness guide your actions, soften your fears, and illuminate the ordinary with extraordinary clarity. Life does not need to change for you to awaken. You only need to remember who you already are. And in that remembering, freedom emerges, clarity emerges, peace emerges, not because the world has shifted, but because your perception of it has. You are infinite, you are present, you are whole, and the moment you recognize this, everything, every thought, every action, every encounter takes on a new dimension. You do not need to search any further. You have always been here. Welcome home.